All right. Hello, good evening. Happy Tuesday. It's Tuesday, so that means that it is time for Talk Openly. I'm Jack, and this is my good friend Daniel.
Hi, Jack. Hello, audience.
We're so happy to be here tonight. We're going to be talking about the very important and foundational meditation practice of shamatha. And I'm looking forward to talking about it. I think every time I have the opportunity to talk about shamatha, I learn a little bit more. So I'm really glad we get to do this tonight, Daniel.
Yeah, and I know that I've learned a lot from you about shamatha, so I expect that I'll be continuing to learn this evening. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And in those times when we were doing shamatha beginner meditation at Lion's Roar in Sacramento, I was learning right along with everyone. Even though I was facilitating, it was like, I think that was part of the reason Mama put me there, was like, okay, you got to learn this first. So if you're going to teach it, you got to be on top of your game.
That's right.
Um,
That's right. He's a smart guy.
he is a smart guy. That is for sure. But before we get into that, I'd love to hear from you, Daniel, about how your week has been, maybe a little bit about how your Dharma training is going and what's happening in your life.
Yeah. Nothing too exciting to report in life conditions. It just continues to do its thing.
Do its thing.
Yeah, I can't actually think of anything too exciting or interesting to share there. And my meditation practice is good. I mean, in the sense that I don't lose a day. It continues on and on. One thing that I have found, I tend to get like kind of locked in. Like I find like a pattern that works for me, like a routine, if you will. And then like I sort of like I get kind of locked into it. Like this is what I have to do. I have to do this, and I have to do it just like this, the same time, same way, whatever you want
Totally.
to call that. And that's helpful in some sense. Like routines can be helpful to me, but then I do notice like sometimes it's really important for me, like when I notice that it's getting too rigid, to break it up a little bit,
Yeah.
so I have been for quite some time now waking up really early in order to do my practices. And then I just like, and most of the time it's fine, but like last night I felt quite like, I was like, man, like early in the day, I started to feel really tired, and it stayed with me all day where I was just like really tired. And I was like, whatever. When I went to bed, I was going to do my usual thing, wake up at the same time, back into it. And I woke up this morning and I was like, you know, and something's got to give, like it's okay. Like
Yeah.
let me honor myself here. And so I went ahead and I didn't, there was no intention to not do the practice, but instead I broke it up and I just said, no, I'm gonna sleep. And like it was really pleasant. And then I had good energy all day and wasn't sleepy during my meditation. And it all worked out just fine. And I think it's actually really important for me to sort of break frame when I like that. And I do that too with the actual meditations themselves, right? So both the sort of like preliminary practices that I do before I sit, sometimes I vary that a little bit if I notice that I'm getting too much into a rut.
Mm.
I'll vary that a little bit. And then most recently, just by adding in, I've added more time. I think I talked about this before, but I had noticed that with a 24-minute sit, that I was getting sort of anxious energy before the sit ended. And then I actually just started, doing a little bit of the sending and receiving Tong Lin when I got excited, or, towards the end. But then I wanted to do more Tong Lin. So I extended the amount of time that I was sitting, and that's working out beautifully. It was such a good
Nice.
solution to the problem, right? Not to back off, but to actually go forward. And the additional variety, I think, like just adding that practice to my shamatha meditation has been really helpful.
Yeah, you're bringing up some great points about like how to have a sustainable practice, right? Because, if we're not living in a monastery, we don't have a schedule where things are really, we have to be on top of it. And so, we're here in our everyday lives and we have to make it workable and livable. And so, I'm reminded of that quote that Lama often says is, the best practice is the one that you actually do.
Right.
And so I think, yeah, the best practice for me has been one where I've allowed myself a little bit of flexibility, and also not to force myself to do kind of the same things over and over, because same as you, I can get kind of rigid.
Yeah.
Um, Things don't have like the same maybe energy that they had like when I first started the practice. And so I think it's good to like, while I think it's important to let yourself really mature within a certain type of like meditation, I also think it's really good to change things up sometimes. Or like you're doing, maybe just add something to it,
Yeah.
and give it a different feel. Um, and yeah, I've definitely done that with my training as well. Um, about a year ago, I was doing this really wild schedule where, I would wake up, I would just sleep 6 hours a night. That was like my goal, is like, I don't want to sleep more than 6 hours because I have things I need to be doing, which is like, it was just such like a absurd mind frame. But anyways, um, and it came from a good place though, right? I was like, I want to be disciplined. I
Yeah.
really want to be
Yeah.
like, on my game.
That's
I'm
right.
into this like meditation practice. I really want to do this. And so it's coming from a good place. But maybe not quite as skillful as I could be. And so, depending on what time of night I would go to bed, like sometimes I would go to bed at 9:30, which would mean I was waking up at 3:30 the next
Oh,
morning.
that's brutal. That
It
is
was
just brutal.
it was so brutal. And so what I started noticing is like, okay, yeah, I'm getting up to sit. That is like some really good discipline. I can't believe that I'm waking up at 3:30 in the morning. Wow. At the same time, I started noticing that in my meditations, I was barely there.
Yeah.
Like, and it wasn't even that I was falling asleep. It was just like I was just kind of like, but things felt tedious. They felt tight. And there wasn't just that kind of presence and awareness that I
That's right.
really remembered that, okay, yeah, that's where I want to be. And so with Lama's encouragement too, I just kind of I gave myself liberty to be a not an average human, but yeah, an average human, right? Get up at a time that feels right for my body,
Yeah.
um, and take care of myself. And I think that's actually, Buddha Shakyamuni's one of his big discoveries, right? Is that it's actually about a middle way. There's and each of us, I think, have to find our kind of middle way, especially as householders,
Yeah.
people who don't live in a monastery, but who do want to do intense practice and training. We need to find that balance with our everyday life and our training. Otherwise, one or both of those are going to somehow tip over.
That's right. It's a never-ending discovery process. Like in the beginning, what you discover when you first sit, and then the sort of excitement, like this eagerness that you're talking about, how it sort of manifests, like I'm gonna do this, right? And then you keep watching, and you just keep watching, and you keep seeing, like, oh wow, okay, that's I'm not balanced there, right? And you just keep kind of bringing it back, like it's this kind of yee-yaw, right? Kind of moving back and forth, like, and it does eventually, I think, stabilize. I'm not suggesting that I'm there yet, but there's a sense that eventually, like, you find sort of more of an even keel.
I think so too. Yeah. And yeah, finding what works for you, um and still, yeah, having that discipline where it's like that idea of meditation being non-negotiable. Okay, well, if it's non-negotiable, then what things might I have to kind of kick to the side a little bit? Like,
Yeah,
I don't watch TV as much anymore. Like, I
yeah.
still watch a little bit, but I used to watch, at least an hour a night of TV. And I don't do that anymore, you know.
You know what
And
though? You know what I gotta say about that term, the non-negotiable part, because I learned that from you, and it's been very, very, very helpful. Except that my mind kind of took it. right?
Yeah.
And it did this sort of like interpretation of what that meant as to create this sort of rigidity where I was
Right.
like, no, I have to do this. You know, it was weird because I know it was I kind of feel like I shot myself in the foot. I was at beginner's meditation, and Sue Forster was leading, and we go around the circle and like talk about how our practice is going. And I said, yeah, it's really great. My meditation has become non-negotiable. I am on, and there was this part of me that was like, oh, don't say that, don't do
Uh,
it, don't do it. But it was sort of like there was pride. Like I was sort of, no, I wasn't gloating. It wasn't like that, but there was there was ego mixed up in there. There was something else going on besides simply, knowing that I want to maintain a consistent, regular practice. And that's what I mean by non-negotiable. There was something about saying it out loud like that in the way that I did it. Man, like right away, like there started to be sort of like challenges, right, to to meditation. So I
yeah.
like even there, even with helpful tools, sometimes the ego is tricky, right? It can seize them and start to play tricks on us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the same tricks that my mind plays too, is that it's like and that's why I was waking up at absurd
That's
times of
right.
the morning, is because of that very thing of feeling like I need to prove something, or like
Yeah,
I've got to be I've got to be strong and fierce, and those aren't bad things, but the way in which I was doing it, it was like um disciplinary in a kind of a negative way. Like there was something
yeah.
in me that was saying like, you're still not doing good enough.
That's
You need,
right. That's
right?
it. That's it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. That part right there, that part that's sort of like, even though like there's so much goodness in doing this, in whatever we do, however we do it, there's goodness that even in our intention there, right? There's some goodness to it. But man, there's some sort of like little part that you just like you just pointed to, which is like, no, I'm not doing enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not whatever. There's something
Yeah.
like that. So I got to break through that. But I'm curious, before we go too far with it,
Yeah.
how is it now for you? Like, what was like the last week like for you?
Oh, well, I mean, it's really nice that I'm no longer, maybe I shouldn't say no longer, right? Because that's where we get in trouble. I have attained the no longer hard on myself, Jack. That's not true. I still am hard on myself, but um I feel like just so because I tend to be someone who's really hard on myself, I have to, in some ways, to correct myself and come back to more of a middle. That means I need to be really, really gentle in some ways. And so my way of being gentle within a non-negotiable meditation practice is that if I notice that my attention is like really just not with it today for some reason, what I'll do, instead of doing a whole half-hour chunk, I'll break it up into 2 15s.
Yeah.
So I'll start with 15 minutes, and then I'll take a break. Maybe I'll do some reading. Maybe I'll, do some Tonglen or listen to like a Lamrim meditation. And then I'll go back into the 15 minutes of
Yeah.
shamatha. Um, because as we're going to talk about today, shamatha can feel pretty grueling. And so giving myself that, just allowing to have my mind be in that state of, I'm distracted. That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
And it feels less productive to just kind of sit in that state, knowing that I'm, not actually applying myself, um, than to cut myself short and say, okay, we're just gonna, totally do a restart and then get back into it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've noticed that usually what happens is that second sit is a lot more focused.
Yeah.
Um, it's really cool. Yeah. And I used to just feel like I had to just bear down and like just get through like the full sit. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
that might actually backfire, because one, like it doesn't make me really want to come back to meditation, right? If it just
That's
feels
right.
like grueling. And two, it's not teaching you anything about like how to come back to your focus. At least when I'm in that state where it's so bouncy and I'm not applying antidotes, which we'll talk about later,
Yeah.
then it's just not an effective meditation.
Mm, mm, mm.
So I think that's
Wise
where I'm being
words.
kind. Yeah, that's where I'm
Yeah.
being kinder to myself. I'm waking up later, which is good. Um, and yeah, and varying up like my other practices. So I do a tantra practice, but then sometimes instead of that, I'll read, or I'll do some Lamrim meditation. So yeah, I think for me right now, at least in my life right now, um, giving some variety is awesome. It's really exciting. It's interesting, and we
Right. That's
want it
what's
to
so
be
cool.
interesting.
Yeah, it's cool. That's what, same, right? Like that's it. There's so much that can be done. There's so much, right? Like there's so many different ways to approach these various practices, different ways to marry them with our own needs, our own basic needs, right? And so like it makes me really happy to know that you're caring for yourself that way without giving up the practice, right? Without giving up your training, but like giving yourself what you need, whether it's a little more sleep or a little more variety.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. These are good. I think these are really good strides.
I think it'll serve. I think doing that kind of strategy is probably going to serve both of us for quite some time if we're going to continue to meditate.
Yeah, I think so too. Awesome. Well, I'm really glad to hear about, yeah, what you've been doing and yeah, how you've been kind of shifting your perspective. Um, what do you say? Should we just jump into shamatha?
Yeah, what the heck is it?
So shamatha, yeah, foundational, isn't it? Foundational practice. So in a nutshell, shamatha meditation is also referred to as single pointed meditation. And so basically, for whatever set amount of time, you're directing your focus towards a single object. And that could even be a literal physical object in front of you that you direct your attention to. Or it could be a visual representation. The kind of image that is most recommended is like Shakyamuni Buddha. Or what's especially recommended for people who are just starting out, and also people who have a lot of tendency towards distraction, is to just simply focus on your breathing. Um, so really, that's the nuts and bolts of it. Shamatha is all about just, I'm going to direct my attention towards this single object. Um, but of course, there's a lot of bells and whistles that happen around that.
Yeah, but okay, why? Right? What's the point? Okay, so it's an exercise of some sort, right?
Hmm.
To focus become, concentrate on one thing, whether it's an object or your breath or what have you. Like, why? Like, why
Yeah,
bother?
it's a great question. Um, well, the simple answer is that we're training our mind like a muscle. And so, imagine going to the gym and let's say you're trying to, get the heaviest deadlift that you can. What you're going to be doing in the gym is exactly, you're going to be lifting weights, doing deadlifts, gradually, adding on weight as you go. And what Shamatha is doing is that, kind of that very focused, like you would be in the gym, where you're just zeroing in on this one muscle. You're not really going anywhere else. That's your intention, is this one muscle, is this very focused attention. And so what's so cool about that is that, like, it's so simple. And when we have something simple, it's like it kind of takes, it takes the guesswork out of it.
Yeah.
And so it's this really, really acute way to train our minds, to just become more focused. And then with that ability to focus our minds, we can then point it towards other things, whether that's maybe a text we're reading, or we're doing an analytical meditation, which is also known as Vipassana meditation, where we're meditating on a certain topic. And then later on down the road, we might be meditating on emptiness. And in order to be able to contain in our minds those ideas, we have to have shamatha. If we don't have focused attention, that one muscle just like kind of focusing, zeroing in, what's going to happen in the mind, is what happens during everyday life.
Yeah.
And every time that we sit is that there's, all of the kind of chaos and all of our kind of, delusions of self that arise. And so that is really what shamatha is all about is, can we zero in on that focus muscle and really get that strong enough so that it can really be able to hold our attention on important topics.
I like the gym sort of metaphor. I actually went to the gym for the first time in a long time today. I did legs,
Nice.
worked on my legs.
Right on.
Yeah, yeah. I like it because I think that the similarity there is that it's against the grain of our normal sort of habitual tendencies, at least for me, right? The reason I don't go to the gym every day is because my usual tendency is to sit. I walk a lot, but like low, like not focus on one particular muscle group or not anything like that. I just sort of like do whatever feels good, right? And similarly with our minds, they, at least my mind, still to this day, but definitely before I started practicing shamatha meditation, um, it was the exact opposite of concentrated. It was totally the opposite, right? Like I just, constantly fleeting from one thought or image or concept or whatever to another. I mean, like really, you talk about monkey mind. There was like a whole jungle full of monkeys in there, all screaming. It was, cacophony or whatever you call it, just going crazy in there. And it's so wild to me, to think about. Like I even sometimes I was reflecting on it today. Like I wish I could sort of like remember, like if I could just have some moments where I could sort of be like that again, right? Like, so I could experience it again, just because I have such gratitude. I really appreciate how much more collected and how much calmer my mind is now, but I kind of take it for granted, like as I develop greater and greater concentration and more calm in my mind, it's sort of like I kind of forget like how wild and crazy it was in there. Like,
Totally.
yeah. Mm.
Well, I don't know. It's still wild and crazy in there for me. But it's certainly quieted down. And one thing that's happened too is that it's like I can focus my mind enough on my object that all of that stuff can still be happening and my object is still there. So it's like the craziness, the monkey mind, it's still happening around me, but I'm just more interested in what's happening with my object. Not all the time.
When
Sometimes I'm more interested in what's happening up here. The object's still here, and I'm kind of like,
when you meditate, what's your go-to object and what's your favorite object?
Hmm. Well, what I've been doing lately is that my morning meditation, I'll focus on the image of a Buddha. And I have a really special image of Shakyamuni Buddha that's kind of my reference point. And it's actually from a card that the Sangha gave me when I took refuge.
Aw.
And so it's got just like, a lot of good meaning, good vibes in there. And so that image I've been using for a good almost 4 years now.
And do you look
Um,
at it? Do you keep your eyes open and on it, or do you kind of like close your eyes a little bit and sort of imagine it?
yeah, if I'm like especially distracted, I'll direct my eyes to the actual image. But no, typically what I do is I'm reconstructing the image in front of me. And sometimes it very spontaneously just arises, and can stay right there, you know. Um, uh, but sometimes it almost feels like I really am like putting it together. I'm like constructing
Oh
it.
yeah.
And sometimes too, have you ever noticed, does it ever feel like you're maybe you're like at a museum and looking at a painting and kind of like zeroing in on one part of the image? Like I'll especially like looking at the bowl, you know, the bowl of nectar, and like his hand for some reason.
Yeah.
I've got like my favorite parts. um and that's kind of funny, and I don't altogether know if that's the best technique.
I've heard
um
I had the same conversation with another Sangha member and asked, I said,
yeah,
this is, I feel like I'm constructing the image like this. And they were like, that sounds pretty normal. This is like how
yeah.
it's done, you know? I had this, I got to tell you, as far as visualization, goes, I had this funny experience this morning, actually, where I was doing something similar to you, right? I'm doing this visualization, and okay, so like I kind of like I tend to just get like it's like being in a museum or something where I'm at a fixed vantage point,
Mm,
right? And so, I in order to see the head, I kind of got to look up, and to see the feet or whatever, I got to look down. And then there's and actually, like the bowl, right? Like, okay, so you're looking at the bowl, and like I'm sort of maybe like equal with the bowl, right? And
yeah.
so like I have this like fixed vantage point, and then I sort of like, in order to see more clearly, see more of it, I have to sort of like kind of like move around it. And then I had this, I was like, wait, you're in your mind, you could do whatever you want. And so I like looked inside the bowl and looked at the nectar. It was like, oh, look at I don't have like, oh, I could be all over it at the same time. I don't have to be in this one like fixed vantage point. It was this aha moment for me. I loved it.
Wow, that is really fun. Did you
Right? Like
notice
if I
when
want to
you
be
were,
looking at the backside of it, I could be doing that right now, right? And if I want to look at the
yeah,
top, I could do that. I don't have I'm not fixed.
yeah. I definitely want to explore that a little more and see what's happening in my mind when I do that, you know, because sometimes I wonder if I'm just trying to make it like more exciting, you know, like, oh, I'm moving to another area, or oh, I'm brightening this part of the image, or, you know, like, am I
Oh,
just trying to make it more interesting so that I can get through the meditation, you know? Um,
interesting.
so that's something I'm gonna ask Lama about that. Like, is my mind like trying to get an out almost? Like, am I still just dealing with excitement when I'm doing that? You
Oh, you're gonna
know?
have to report back.
Yeah, I definitely will. Yeah, I'm talking to him this Saturday, so I'll bring it up. But um, yeah, and then as far as, you know, like the breathing object goes, like I do that at night during my evening practice. And hey, maybe I'll switch it up because I don't want to get too rigid. So maybe I'll swap them tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I really have lately been focusing on the breath going in and out of the nose. And I think what's different for me about that one than maybe feeling it in my stomach or my chest, um, is that it's such a small area that to put my focus there, I really have to like notice what's happening. Whereas with my belly, it's kind of like I'm noticing my whole body almost. And so I feel like my attention can kind of move around a lot. And so I like that about, you know, feeling the breath going in and out of the nostrils, is that it's such this like localized point, that it really draws my attention in. Um, and I think that's you know, you have to kind of find what works for you in shamatha, because at all times we're dealing with our own like inner workings and whatnot. And for me, I'm someone who deals with a lot of distractions. So that's my main obstacle in shamatha, is that um my brain is just going all every which way. I'm interested in everything but my object. And so I really have to like find ways um, to really direct my mind. And so that's one way that I've found. But other people might find that like, oh, I have a super distracted mind. And so I need to find a way to calm myself. And so maybe focusing on your belly and slow breath, maybe that is something that's helpful for you. I've noticed that for myself sometimes too. It's like, if the distractedness is more that I'm anxious, maybe I need to do something that's very calming
Yeah.
to kind of like bring myself more towards my own middle. So yeah, I'm wondering, what are some obstacles that you tend to face in your practice?
My primary obstacle is laxity. I in the sense that I yeah, just the a little bit of the drifting, um maybe not maybe not caring as much, maybe if when I drift even.
Yeah,
um you know, it has been less, it's been less problematic recently than it has in the past. In the past, I would oftentimes sort of like enter like kind of dream states, you know, not because I was sleepy, but just that was just the form that my thoughts were taking at the time. And I would just like follow them. And even when I kind of noticed that that was what was happening, I wouldn't really apply any antidote or anything. I would just sort of be like, oh, right. And then just sort of like let it keep going. Whereas nowadays it doesn't seem, it's still on the dreamy sort of end of the spectrum. I don't have like a lot of like screaming clear thoughts. But I'm able to stay sort of with my object. It's easier, like you were saying, like I'm there, I'm on my object, and I can sort of like notice that the thoughts are doing the stuff and just kind of bring it back. One thing I have, one thing I wanted to say that I've discovered relatively recently, I've almost always and still do use my breath as and various points, whether it be, you know, hyper super localized or sort of broad body. I've used the breath as my object mostly for most of my practices. But recently, I've been doing more sort of using mantras as
mm,
my object. And I've discovered that it's very helpful for whatever kind of mind. I don't know how to classify my mind, but but they're very helpful. For one, I think it's because it's active and engaged,
yeah,
and so there's less. I don't move off nearly as much. I mean, like it's it's a big difference between like when I'm on my breath, I tend to move off of it quite frequently and come back. You know, whatever. There's this. It's a little bit more of this coming and going. Um, but with the mantra, it's like, man, like I'm on it and it stays super concentrated. Like in my thoughts, there's fewer thoughts, and as they happen, I just sort of like I see it, but I'm just on the mantra. So I found them really helpful.
that's really interesting. Yeah, I'm thinking, how do you do it? Like, do you say it out loud or is it internal? What does it
Yeah,
kind of look like?
I've practiced both ways. So like if I'm in group meditation, then I just do it, you know, silently. And in that case, I actually learned this. I discovered this because Sue was leading one of the beginner groups, and she said something to the effect of, or actually it wasn't even her, but she pointed to the use of mantras, and I used this one that was uh, that I've heard: breathing in, I cherish myself; breathing out, I cherish others.
Mm,
And I just thought, you know, like that was the first time that I really like, you know, stayed with it for an entire sit, and it was amazing that I'm at like how short the time felt. Like I wasn't lost or anything, but it felt almost effortless.
mm,
Pretty amazing. And then when I practice on my own and I use a mantra, then I say it out loud, but it's very quiet. It's more just like there's like a movement there, but it's not like super. I'm not chanting, you know, so
yeah.
it's not quite the same thing. But yeah, mantras have been very helpful to me.
That's great. Yeah, I love hearing that because I really haven't done a lot of that. I mean, I'll do mantra when I'm doing like a tantric practice. But shamatha, I think I've only done a shamatha practice with mantra like once. And I do remember it being pretty powerful. I was doing the Tara mantra.
Yeah.
And it was really nice. It felt like there was this real kind of intimacy
Right.
with Tara and with the words. And for some reason I haven't returned to it.
Yeah.
It's just so funny.
I've had
But yeah,
similar
thank you for that reminder.
yeah, similar experience. What you just said. I use the 100 syllable Vajrasattva mantra, and what I like about it, I think this is literally just like because of whatever my brain really wants to be engaged with something. The 100 syllables, it's enough, again, enough variety going on there, right? It's not quite so simple. It's a little bit more complicated, right? So it keeps me more like locked on to it somehow. It's really,
Yeah,
really amazing stuff.
yeah, for sure. Oh, really cool. Yeah, I'm glad that we're talking about all the different types of objects, because it is so interesting. And like other objects that I've used rocks, like, physical objects. I've
Yeah.
used rocks, leaves. I actually did a meditation a while ago in one of the groups that I run on the psych unit. And I brought in some autumn leaves from outside. And we just had the leaves in front of us, and we just, were gazing at the leaves. And the general feeling afterwards was that there was this kind of like real sweet intimacy with our leaf, with our
Oh
own
gosh,
individual
okay.
leaf.
I love it. I love it. I'm so glad that you brought this up. Can I
Yeah,
share one? This is crazy,
please.
but okay.
Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, I wanted to it was a beautiful day, and so I thought, well, I'll do my practice outside, right? And so I cleaned, made sure the yard was all clean and nice, just right for me. It was great. So then I bring out my meditation cushion, everything's laid out, and I sit down, and I'm like, oh, this is great. And then I ring the bell, and then I get my body posture just right, 45 degrees, looking down, my eyelids, you know, and what is right? I thought I was going to meditate on my breath, but guess what was right in front of me?
A beautiful leaf.
No, a pile of dog shit. So then, and I'm like, ah, oh no,
Yeah.
oh no. And I thought, well, okay, I guess I should get up and move it. And then there was just something inside me that said, no, that's your object of
You're
concentration.
gonna
Right?
stare
That's
at
your
that pile
and
of poop.
and you're gonna. And so I did. And just like you and your group, there was an amazing meditation. I don't think I'll ever forget. Not just because, aha, it's funny, the object, how it was unexpected, but no, it was actually this real sort of intimacy where I like all of the whole universe was right there, right? And there was so
Yeah.
much joy and peace and beauty and all of this. There's just goodness. It was amazing, right? Like just sitting there watching it and just like watching what the mind did with it. Fantastic. I highly recommend it if you get the opportunity.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, I do have a cat litter box that is full of poop. I could
Oh,
totally go there.
Your
But you
heart,
do,
your heart will expand with gratitude for James, the
yeah,
cat.
yeah. It is it's fascinating that shamatha really has that potential. And typically, shamatha, the idea is kind of that you are going into the gym. You're trying to create ideal conditions for your mind to focus. And so, typically you could say sit at an altar. But I think actually what can really be an incredible training is that taking it outside
Yeah.
and seeing what your mind does while you're trying to focus on an object. And then of course, that there's going to be objects that are out of the ordinary, and what the mind can do with that. And um whenever I do like a physical object in my shamatha meditation, it is that feeling of, oh wow, I'm really not separate from this object.
Right.
I'm just not. Like I'm just here. I am looking at this, and what's happening is that there's this body that's sitting here. There's this awareness that there's something in front of me, and then there's the thing. And really, there's no difference between all of those things, where it's all the same. um and it can be so beautiful.
Yeah.
how amazing that just directing our attention, directing our focus towards something can really do this. And we don't even have to try to think about it. We don't have to analyze, right? Like, I think Vipassana analytical meditation is really important, where we're like dissecting a topic and really trying to think through it and get to know ourselves in the way that reality works and whatnot. But sometimes just this kind of direct experience through directing our focus can be all the learning in itself, right?
That's right. That's right. Well, can I, you brought this up and this has been on my mind. So we're going to go with it.
Let's do it.
Okay. So the other day I was talking to Lama and he was just, whatever, we're just chatting about meditation at Lion's Roar. And I said, well, all of the meditations that we're doing are, it's always shamatha, right? No matter what we're doing, it's always shamatha. And I thought Vipassana was the other wheel of the chariot, right? Like, why, like, there's not a Vipassana practice that I am aware of that's, that we do here. And he kind of looked at me with his puzzled look. And then I like, as if like, I don't know, it was weird. And I said, well, yeah, there used to be this one Vipassana meditation, like that lasted for a little bit, a few months or whatever, before Connor went to India, right? Like there was this one. And then he goes, oh, yeah. You're talking about analytical meditation. And he said, Vipassana meditation, insight meditation, and shamatha meditation are not different things. There is he said shamatha leads to insight, right? It's not, they're not like we want to there is this it's not wrong, and this is not his explanation, but this is what I went and like read more about later, because he was like, no, insight meditation and shamatha, they go together like the two wheels of the chariot, right? They're not separate things, but there are analytical meditations and ways of doing that. And that's oftentimes referred to as Vipassana meditation. And there is this way of sort of creating this divide, right? Like, okay, no, this is shamatha and this is Vipassana or whatever. But that actually that there's this that shamatha Vipassana, not two, but just shamatha Vipassana, right? Like that when we get the culmination of that, that is the Buddha nature, right? This calm, insightful presence.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. Yeah, that's really important, and it changes the way I think about the analytical meditations, because when that's the case, then our object of the shamatha practice is whatever the topic is that we're meditating on.
That's
yeah,
right.
that's cool. That definitely that makes so much sense.
Yeah, me too. I was really grateful because it's been beaten around in here. I just kept telling myself, well, yeah, I get these, these insights, if you will, during shamatha, but I'm actually just supposed to be focusing on my breath, right? Like there's this sort of like, no, just like, yeah, okay, it's an insight. That's great. Like, but just come back, right?
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. But I just had this sort of misunderstanding, and I was so grateful to have it cleared up for myself, right? Like, that actually the two things they go together, and I think that you alluded to that, right? There actually in shamatha, while we're concentrated, there is insight.
There is. Yeah. Yeah, and it happens just so naturally and beautifully.
Right.
I was reminded of this time that I was sitting outside, kind of like you were, um, and I was at a park, and as it wasn't McKinley Park? No, it was a park in Sacramento that's real close to the freeway. Cesar Chavez Park.
Cesar Chavez, is that you're maybe
Yeah,
south side?
I think it was Cesar Chavez.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyways, the park doesn't matter, but you can kind of imagine it in your head. And the vibe was like warm springtime Sacramento. People are out getting some sun. It's like lunchtime. I was on my lunch break, and there were kids running around, families. There was like cars driving around playing music. And I was sitting And my object, I actually was focusing on the image of Vajrasattva. And I remember at this time in my practice, I was really like kind of starting to, just kind of fall in love with the certain imagery, and Vajrasattva was one that I felt really connected to and still feel really connected to. And so I was bringing, his image to mind at the park. And I remember just this really direct feeling as I was still, focusing. I was really focused, like really focused directly on Vajrasattva. But what happened is that this direct feeling of being completely merged with everything and everyone around me. And so it was like, these people driving by, like playing really loud mariachi music, and, kids like running around throwing things.
Yeah.
And I was just felt like just completely in love
Yeah.
with everyone
Yeah.
around me. And yeah, I'm so grateful for that one sit, right? Because it gave me so much motivation and energy to come back. Because when we get those little glimpses of the truth through shamatha meditation, it's like, wow, we could really, the potential that is there to experience just complete, open, loving, blissful, compassion and union with everything around us. Like that's it.
It's
And
outrageous.
it
And
is, it's so outrageous.
and I'm reminded, I remember this, there was a saying that this Swami that I used to listen to, he would say regarding these kinds of meditative practices, he'd say, they're simple. They're so simple. Anybody could do it. It's so simple. Literally anybody can do it. It's simple, but not easy.
Totally.
Right, but it's
Yeah,
worth it, right? Like they
it's
like,
worth
yeah,
it.
like it's worth it. Just what you're saying, like, like the whole analogy or the metaphor of the gym, right? Like sometimes we're in the gym and it's ideal circumstances, whatever, where it's quiet, we have our altar, we have the time, the body, comfort, everything is just right. And there we are, and we're working on it, and that's great. That's what that's a good thing to be doing on a regular basis, right? But then there's times where you take it out of the gym and you get to like, feel those muscles, feel what it's like to jump from boulder to boulder, and, like whatever it is, right? To really immerse, as you're talking about, whatever it is, right? Whatever is experiencing, whatever's unfolding. I don't even want to spend the remaining time talking about all the wonderful experiences I've had outside in meditative practices, whether you're talking about music or even, what sounds normally really like awful, like people screaming and yelling and stuff like that, right? All kinds of terrible noises, and how like it can be really an immersive, blissful experience, right? And
Yeah,
not evasive. It's not, like it's immersive. It's directed towards, it's moving towards reality, right? And
right.
there's this quote that I really like by Thich Nhat Hanh that I have to share. That it's just
Yeah.
it's the perfect time for it. So he says, in mindfulness, one is not only restful and happy, but alert and awake. Meditation is not evasion; it's a serene encounter with reality. And
Mm,
isn't that what we're going for? Like, a serene encounter with reality.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I love that.
That's what you described at the park, right?
Yeah.
You had a
Yeah.
serene encounter with reality.
Right. And what's so cool too is that, like you said, even what happens as we develop, our shamatha training and our attention, is that we don't even have to be in formal meditation, whether that's at the altar or in the park. We can, on the bus, on a walk, talking with loved ones, we can we can start to notice our attention in whatever we're doing. And am I actually paying attention? Sometimes I'll check. I don't know if you do that like during in the middle of the day, where it's just like I'll kind of do like a little stop and be like, what am I doing right now?
Oh yeah.
And can I like notice like how incredible it is that I'm here right now and what's
Yep.
around me. And even in the most like mundane of circumstances, like a, hospital hallway, it's like there's a lot happening around me all the time. And it's fascinating. And I start to feel just so much more just present to other people's,
Mhm.
emotions and um yeah, how they're moving. I just notice
Right.
like little things,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
we can just start, it just makes us so much more intelligent, in all the different types of intelligences, right?
Inward and outward. Have you noticed too how like how you're much more in tune with your body you become,
Yeah.
right? Like even if you were not even in the fancy hallway of a psych ward or whatever, right? Like not even that. Even if you were, in a black room with no sensory stimulation whatsoever, this kind of mindfulness, this awareness, you become so like, oh wow, there's this going on, there's all this stuff happening in my mind, and here's this tightness in my body, or here's this relaxation, and you really
Yeah.
get to life becomes all these like senses and everything that we're experiencing, it becomes so rich, so like
Yeah.
dense, right? It doesn't take much.
Yeah, totally. I know. It's just, it's, yeah, I love that you say that. It's so dense. And going back to being in a, totally dark room and being really intrigued by that, I'll tell you a short story about that and how I used my my meditative awareness to be okay. So I have a client who is living in public housing, and it's a pretty tough building. It's a lot of people who are coming off the streets, dealing with substance use, addiction, and the building is not kept up very well.
Hmm.
So one of the elevators, um, I didn't know this. When I got in, it was pitch black.
Ooh, oh no, that's like stuff nightmare, that's nightmare fuel.
Yeah. And at every, level of the building, it could have stopped, right? And someone could come in and you'd be in complete darkness with a stranger. Right. So I noticed, I got into that elevator and it closed, and it was like, okay, this is what's happening right now. I can't avoid what's happening. So let's get really curious. Like for this,
Okay.
whatever it's going to be, it's going to be like 15-20 seconds that I'm going to be in this pitch black elevator. And it was so cool. It was like, wow, this is actually really fascinating, like sensory deprivation. This is interesting. And so it was like the fear kind of settled down, and it was like, let's actually see what's here. Like what is actually here is not what my mind is projecting. It's
Oh,
just pitch black. Wow, cool. And that is totally due to shamatha.
yeah. Yeah, you
Like
bring
that
a
is
certain
not because,
curiosity to it, right?
right.
And it's so much, without giving away too much of what ends up happening in shamatha practice. It, what I think is amazing is whether we're talking about something like what you just said, which is like a reasonable fear. There's good reason. I'm afraid just hearing the story, right? So, like, whether it's fear, whether it's physical pain in the body, or whether it's thoughts, discursive thinking, when we turn our awareness towards that and concentrate our awareness on whatever that is, we get to see its true nature, right? We get to see what it actually is rather than maybe what we think it is or how we are reacting to it. And inevitably, it's not whatever we thought it was. In fact, oftentimes it sort of dissolves, right? Not that you can't use it like a tool and be like, I'm going to look at my fear and my fear is going to go away, or I'm going to look at my pain and the pain's going to go away. But what you notice is when you really bring awareness to the pain or the fear or the thoughts, they they don't have the solidity. They're not really there in the way we think they're there.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, have you ever noticed, this is what happens in my mind where, if I'm having a meditation where I'm really distracted, sometimes I'll just kind of, maybe I'll turn my mind towards a thought and it starts to
Mm,
become like almost like garbled. It's like it just kind of falls apart.
yes. Oh,
And
oh,
same thing too,
yes.
where maybe if I'm really I'm not aware of the fact that I'm really following the train of thought of a thought, I'll be like, okay, come back to the breath, and thought's still there, and it'll almost become like I have no other way of describing it than like kind of like word salad.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just
Yes.
really absurd. And and it's like, oh yeah, that's right. That it's just all this like machinations of the mind, like just throwing everything out there.
Right.
But really
Right.
it's just falling apart.
It, oh my gosh. Can I? Okay. I have to, because there was this one particular piece of there's one recommendation that helped me the most with my thoughts. It's a little quote from Milarepa. Can I read it?
Yeah.
Okay. Milarepa says, when you run after your thoughts, you're like a dog chasing a stick. Every time a stick is thrown, you run after it. Instead, be like a lion who, rather than chasing after the stick, turns to face the thrower. One only throws a stick at a lion once,
Nice. I love that so much.
right?
It's
When we turn our attention to it, don't run away, don't look, don't chase after it, don't, none of that. Just look, be present with it, right? And whatever its real nature is, will begin to sort of shine forth, whether it's your breath, or thoughts, or dog poop, or whatever the heck it is, right? Like it's this practice is, it's magical.
it is. Yeah, and it's that wonderful combination of like, yeah, that magical feeling that we get when we're really aware and open, and then that really practical effort, that we put. And that's what I love about Buddhist practice in general, is that it really is up to us to apply and put effort towards this. And then the real true magical beauty that starts to unfold. And yeah, it's just brilliant.
And then it becomes joyful effort,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
yeah,
that what we talked about at the outset, that sort of hardness. I'm going to do this and I'm going to accomplish this and I have to, and I'm not good enough, and all of that, some of that stuff that still lingers even, it gives way to something else. And there's real joy. There's real sort of
yeah,
like, ah, I can't believe that this was right here all along.
yeah. I love that you just kind of sighed into
Yeah,
it, right? Because that is the feeling. We just
it
kind of
really is.
we get to set it down and like, yeah, thank goodness.
Yes.
Oh, Daniel, it's been, as always, a blessing. I can't believe, that an hour has passed. Um, I appreciate you very, very much.
Same, Jack. I really, really appreciate you. Thanks for doing this show. I loved. You know what? If there was nobody listening, nobody watching, and never would, I would want to do this still with you every week.
Same. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, and whoever is watching, we appreciate you. We love you,
That's right.
and we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday.
Absolutely. Be well. Be happy. Take care. Bye,
All
Jack.
right,
Bye,
take care.
everybody.
Bye.